At our family dinner, my sister mocked my career. Still designing those boring office buildings, I'm out here changing the world with my startup, she bragged. My parents burst into laughter. So I calmly said, "And where do you think your startup funding came from?" "Oh, right. I was the one financing you until today." The entire table fell silent. And that was the night everything changed. You're probably thinking that was cold. To cut my family off in less than 60 seconds. To not even hear them out. But you have to understand that wasn't a snap decision, that was a dam breaking. For years I hadn't been a daughter. I was a utility. I was the family ATM. And I knew this day would come. I'd actually been preparing for it even if I didn't want to admit it to myself. I opened a file on my laptop, a password-protected spreadsheet I'd grimly named the Scapegoat's Ledger. It was my secret. A place I documented the financial bleeding. I needed to see it in black and white. Needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that the resentment I felt wasn't just me being difficult, as my mother always said. I looked at the total at the bottom of the page, a number that always made my stomach clench. In just 5 years, I had transferred $110,000. $110,000. My salary, my bonuses, my life. It was all there. $20,000 to fund Madison's revolutionary PR startup, which burned through the cash in 6 months and mysteriously closed right after she took a trip to Europe. $40,000 to rescue my father Brian and his consulting firm when he lost his biggest client. He called it a bridge loan. That was 3 years ago. I never saw a cent of it back. And then there were the small cuts, the death by 1,000 transfers. $5,000 every single year wired to my mother Erin for medical fees and club dues that her pension somehow never managed to cover. But the spreadsheet didn't show the real price. It couldn't quantify what that $110,000 actually cost me. It didn't show Tyler. He was a good man, kind, stable, an engineer. He wanted to build a life with me. He talked about buying a small house just outside the city, about a future. And I pushed him away. I told him I wasn't ready, that I was too focused on work. But that was a lie. The truth is, I'd look at my bank account, at the constant draining requests from my family, and I knew. I knew I couldn't start a life with him while I was still funding theirs. I couldn't ask him to marry into that. Into me. The designated ATM. So I let him go. The spreadsheet also didn't show the business I never built. I'm a good architect. I had a plan, a portfolio, a partner. All I needed was capital. The same $20,000 I gave Madison for her failed startup. The same $40,000 I wired to my father. I put my own dreams on hold year after year, telling myself, next year, once they're stable. But they were never stable. The emergencies never stopped. My sacrifice wasn't a temporary fix, it was their permanent lifestyle. And my life was the price. I know what you're thinking. Why did I let it happen? Why did I keep sending the money? Why did I sit there for years and just take it? It's a question I've asked myself 1,000 times. Looking at that spreadsheet, it seems so simple. Just say no. Just stop. But it's never simple, is it? When you're raised to be the responsible one, you're not just taught to be helpful. You're taught that your worth is your helpfulness. My silence wasn't weakness. It was a survival mechanism. It's like being in a prison with no bars. You're trapped by invisible chains forged from a lifetime of guilt, obligation, and the desperate childish hope that if you just do one more thing, if you just rescue them one more time, you will finally be seen, finally be loved. You learn to be self-sufficient because you have to be. You learn to swallow your own needs because they are always less important than the family's latest crisis. You become a master of learned helplessness, not helpless in your own life, but helpless to say no to them. You're not a person anymore. You're a function. You're the emergency contact, the lender, the safety net, the scapegoat. And you accept this role because in a family that only values utility, it's the only role that guarantees you a place at the table. Even if they mock you while you're sitting there, and for them, how could they be so cruel? How could my father, my mother, my sister look me in the eye while taking my money and then laugh in my face? I used to think they were monsters. But the truth is almost worse. They weren't consciously evil. It was just normal. This is the trap of normalized cruelty. When a family dynamic gets this toxic for this long, the abuse becomes routine. The exploitation becomes the default setting. They didn't wake up every morning and think, how can we hurt Emma today? They just did. My father didn't see himself as stealing my future. He saw it as collecting a debt for raising me. My sister didn't see herself as a leech. She saw herself as the creative one who was entitled to funding. My mother didn't see the injustice. She just saw the family's needs being met by the person most capable of meeting them. They weren't hurting me. They were just using me. Because in their story, I wasn't a character. I was a prop. I was the family ATM. And when an ATM stops giving you money, you don't apologize to it. You get angry. You kick the machine. That night at dinner, when I finally said, until today, I wasn't just turning off the money. I was resigning from my role. I was walking off their stage, and I knew they wouldn't just let me go. I knew they would come to kick the machine. The drive back to Austin on I-35 was quiet. The taillights of the cars in front of me blurred into a long red ribbon. I didn't cry. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove. When I got back to my condo, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked through the darkness to my small desk, the city glowing through the window. I opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my face. I logged into my bank. I went to the bill pay section. I saw the recurring payment to Brian. $1,500. Scheduled for the first of the month. My hand was perfectly steady as I moved the cursor and clicked Cancel payment. A pop-up asked, Are you sure? I clicked Confirm. I found the one to Aaron. $500. Cancel payment. Confirm. Then I picked up my phone. I went to my contacts. I found Madison. I looked at her picture for a moment, her smiling on a beach. A vacation I probably paid for. I pressed, Block this caller. I shut the laptop. I plugged my phone in to charge and turned it on silent. For the first time in my adult life, I went to sleep with nothing hanging over me. It took 2 days for the machine to realize it was unplugged. And then, just as I'd predicted, they started kicking. First, my father, Brian. Not a text. A voicemail. His voice was heavy, booming with that familiar, disappointed authority I had known my whole life. Emma, you have a responsibility to this family. I don't know what kind of childish game you're playing, but it stops now. You are being selfish. Call me. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I deleted it. Then my mother, Erin. Her approach was different, sharper, designed to wound. A long, rambling text about how my father was so stressed he couldn't sleep, how she was worried about his health, how I was tearing the family apart over a simple dinner conversation. It ended with, Please, Emma, don't do this to us, just fix this. I didn't respond. My silence was an answer they had never heard from me before. I went to work. I went to the gym. I tried to live my life. But it was Madison who took the final step. It was Madison who showed me that this wasn't just about money. It was about cruelty. She posted a photo on Instagram. It was a selfie of her, Brian, and Aaron. All three of them clinking wine glasses at some expensive restaurant in Westlake Hills. They were all smiling, perfectly posed. The caption, So grateful to have parents who actually support their kids' dreams and don't get jealous of their success. It's sad when people become bitter. Family first. Blessed, not bitter. I stared at that post. I read the caption 3 times. That's when it happened. That last stupid, childish piece of guilt I was holding onto that tiny voice, wondering if I was being too harsh, if I was the one tearing the family apart. It didn't just fade. It evaporated. It turned to ice. She called me jealous. She called me bitter. After I had single-handedly funded the very success she was bragging about, she wasn't just ungrateful. She was contemptuous. My resolve hardened. This wasn't just about cutting them off anymore. This was about protecting myself. And I knew exactly who to call. Madison's Instagram post wasn't just an insult. It was a strategy. It was a public declaration that in their story, I was the villain. They were the victims. And I knew in that cold, clear moment that this was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about self-defense. The next morning I made a call I hadn't made in years. Nicole. Emma, is that you? Nicole's voice was exactly as I remembered it, from college, sharp, confident, and no nonsense. She'd been a few years ahead of us, and while I went into design, she'd gone straight to law school. Now she was one of the most respected and feared family law attorneys in Texas. I explained everything. The years of payments, the dinner, the Instagram post, the harassment. I just wanted to stop, Nicole, I said, my voice sounding small. Can you just send a cease and desist, tell them to leave me alone? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. A cease and desist is a good start, Nicole said slowly, and I could practically hear her thinking. But people who act this, entitled this brazenly, they rarely stop at harassment. They're panicking because you cut off their money supply. That makes them dangerous. What do you mean? I mean, I don't like this, she said. I want to run a full financial background check on you. Credit report, loan applications, everything. Just to make sure there are no surprises. Just to be safe. I felt a shiver of paranoia. You think they'd do something else? I think, Emma, she said that people who have lived off you for a decade don't just stop when you say no. They find another way. Let me look. I'll call you as soon as I have anything. I agreed and spent the next 3 days in a state of suspended anxiety. The calls from my family continued, but I forwarded them all to Nicole. For the first time, I felt like I had a firewall. Then on Thursday afternoon, Nicole called back. The warm, friendly tone from our first conversation was gone. Her voice was cold. Hard. Emma, I need you to sit down. Are you sitting down? Yes, Nicole. What is it? It's not about the $110,000 anymore, she said, her voice flat. Your father, Brian, applied for a small business administration loan 4 weeks ago. A federal loan. Okay, I said, not understanding. He applied for $75,000. I was still confused. What does that have to do with me? I didn't co-sign anything. Nicole took a deep breath. He didn't list you as a co-signer, Emma. He listed you as the owner of his consulting firm. He used your name, your social security number, and your credit history to apply for the loan. The phone felt slick in my hand. What? What are you saying? I'm saying he forged your signature, Emma. On a federal loan application. That's a felony. I couldn't breathe. $75,000. A federal crime. My father. And it gets worse, Nicole continued, her voice grim. To secure a loan that large, he had to submit proof of company assets, intellectual property. Emma. He submitted your entire architectural portfolio. Your designs for the community center. Your sustainable housing project. Your blueprints. He claimed them all as his company's assets. He didn't just steal your money, Emma. He stole your career. He stole your name. The room started to spin. This wasn't just a toxic family. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. This was a crime. And my father had been willing to sacrifice my entire future just to keep his failing business afloat. The betrayal was absolute. It was complete. And I knew in that moment there was no going back. Nicole and I didn't wait. The moment I gave her the word, she acted. It wasn't a family dispute anymore, it was a federal case. She filed the official fraud reports with the bank and with the Small Business Administration's Office of the Inspector General. The response was immediate and severe. Within 48 hours, the bank's fraud department had confirmed the signature on the loan documents was a forgery. They froze the account. Within 72 hours, the SBA launched a formal investigation into Brian's firm. The machine I had unplugged was now being seized by the federal government. And that's when they finally came to me. It was a Tuesday night. I was working late on a new design proposal when there was a frantic pounding on my condo door. I looked through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was Brian and Erin, my father and mother. I hadn't seen them since that dinner. They looked awful. My father, who was always so put together, looked gray and frail. My mother's eyes were red and swollen from crying. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was raw panic. I opened the door but kept the security chain latched. Emma, thank God, my mother Erin burst into tears, her hands pressed against the small gap in the door. You have to stop this. You have to call them. Tell them to stop. You're destroying your father. I'm not destroying anyone, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel chain between us. I'm protecting myself. My father Brian pushed forward, his voice a hoarse whisper I had never heard before. Emma, please. They're using words. Federal fraud. They're talking about prison. They're going to take my license. Everything is gone. He gripped the door frame. You just have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. Just tell them you gave me permission. That you forgot. Anything. Please, Emma. I'm begging you. I'm your father. I looked at him. At this man who had called me selfish? At this man who had laughed while my sister called me a failure? He was right. He was my father. And he had been willing to sacrifice my entire future to save himself. A misunderstanding, I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through my mother's sobbing. Was it a misunderstanding when you took $20,000 from me for Madison's startup? Was it a misunderstanding when you took $40,000 to save your company? We were desperate, Erin whimpered. Was it a misunderstanding when you stole my portfolio? The crying stopped. Both of them froze. I watched their faces as the blood drained away. They hadn't known I knew. That was my ace. That was the part of their betrayal they thought was still secret. Was it a misunderstanding? When you took my name, I continued and attached it to a federal loan. When you took the one thing that was mine, my work, my future, and claimed it as your own just to get your hands on $75,000. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I reached back to my desk and picked up a thick document binder Nicole had prepared. I pushed it through the gap in the door. It was a full copy of the entire case. The forged signature highlighted, the bank's findings, the stolen portfolio pages, everything. That, I said, is the truth. It's not a misunderstanding. It's evidence. My father stared at the binder in his hands as if it were a bomb. My lawyer will be in touch, I said. Do not come here again. And for the last time, I closed the door on my family. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect when you pull the plug on a machine that's been running on lies. It was fast, and it was total. The bank and the Small Business Administration officially cleared my name. The $75,000 debt was erased from my record, the forgery confirmed. I was legally and financially free. For Brian, it was the opposite. The investigation into the SBA loan uncovered years of financial mismanagement. He was facing federal charges for fraud and wire fraud. His consulting license was revoked. Without my $110,000 and now with a federal investigation, they couldn't cover their debts. The big house in Westlake Hills, the one they stole from me to keep, went into foreclosure. I heard from a cousin that they lost everything. Brian, Erin, and Madison were forced to move out, ending up in a small, cramped rental apartment across town. The empire built on my sacrifices had crumbled to dust. And me? With that weight finally gone, I felt light. I started pouring all that energy I used to spend on them into myself, into my work. I led a new project, a sustainable community design that won the firm a major award. 2 months later, my boss called me in. I wasn't just an architect anymore. I was a senior design lead. The day the house in Westlake Hills was officially sold at auction, I walked to a new bank, one my family had never heard of. I opened a new business account. I transferred $5,000 into it. It was the money I would have sent them over the next few months. But instead, it was seed money. The first investment in my own design firm. I used to think that justice was about punishment. About watching the people who hurt you finally get what they deserve. But I realized that's not justice. That's just balancing a scoreboard. It keeps you chained to the past, focused on their destruction. The real victory, the truest form of justice, is what I call the justice of the cedar. It's not about burning down their world. It's about using the ash they left behind as fertilizer for your own. My family's greatest crime wasn't just stealing my money or my portfolio. It was convincing me that my purpose was to be their safety net. The ultimate justice wasn't watching them fall. It was proving them wrong. It was using the freedom I won to finally build my own future, to sowing seeds, seed a life they couldn't touch. I turned the scapegoat's ledger into my own business plan. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the invisible one, share this. Let someone else know they aren't alone, and that they have the right to plant their own garden.